Baek Hee-sung carefully smeared ketchup under his daughter Eunha's nose to fake a nosebleed. Pretending to panic, he fussed over her dramatically, and Eunha was delighted by how worried her father looked. But the next day at kindergarten, Eunha really did come home with a bloody nose after getting into a fight. Cha Ji-won, though upset, stayed calm and explained that children often get hurt while playing together. She suggested the other little girls simply apologize. The other child's mother refused. She insisted her daughter had done nothing wrong and accused Eunha of touching her daughter's doll first. Even though Eunha explained she only hugged the doll because it looked pretty, the woman coldly told Ji-won to educate her child properly, warning that a child who steals small things will grow up to steal bigger ones. Ji-won was beginning to lose her temper when Baek Hee-sung arrived. The moment he entered, he bowed deeply in apology and even made Eunha apologize too. Though the little girl felt wronged, she still obeyed. Afterward, Eunha became upset with her father. To comfort her, Hee-sung bought her favorite egg tart, but she angrily accused him of not loving her anymore. She even called him weak for apologizing in front of strangers. Hee-sung gently taught her an important lesson. Winning with fists doesn't truly solve anything. Sometimes letting things go prevents bigger trouble later. He pointed out that the little girl often threw her belongings around carelessly. Someday, her doll might disappear, and everyone would simply assume she lost it herself. No one would ever suspect Eunha. What Eunha didn't know was that Hee-sung had secretly thrown the doll into the trash himself. No one around him realized that Baek Hee-sung was actually living under a false identity and hiding a terrifying past connected to a serial murder case from 20 years ago. Since childhood, he had lived under darkness and trauma, bullied by classmates. Now he lived peacefully with his wife Cha Ji-won, a detective, and their 6-year-old daughter Eunha. For years, nobody had uncovered his true identity. Whenever they visited Hee-sung's parents, however, Eunha always hid nervously behind her father. Ji-won would awkwardly encourage her to greet her grandparents, but the elderly couple remained cold and distant. Even Eunha could sense they disliked her. They had only come together because it was Hee-sung's birthday, yet the atmosphere remained painfully stiff. While Ji-won and Eunha stepped away briefly, Hee-sung's mother finally revealed her bitterness, accusing him of showing off his happy family just to torment them. His father quickly stopped her, reminding her that they were all tied together now and couldn't afford internal conflict. What neither parent knew was that Hee-sung had secretly imprisoned someone in the basement beneath his workshop. Earlier, a man had visited his jewelry workshop to repair a necklace. To his shock, he turned out to be an old childhood friend who recognized him instantly. On the surface, Hee-sung politely offered him tea, but internally he was calculating whether he could let him leave alive. His old friend sensed danger immediately and tried to leave after taking only a sip of tea. But Hee-sung stopped him, calmly asking if he was rushing off to report him to the police. Then he cleverly asked him to write down his address so he could return the repaired necklace later. As he sat down to write, unaware of his true intentions, Hee-sung quietly closed the curtains and turned the music volume all the way up. By the time he realized what was happening, it was already too late. Later that evening, Hee-sung acted completely normal at home. Meanwhile, hidden beneath the workshop floor, his kidnapped childhood friend lay tied up in the basement. One day, Eunha complained that her mother wasn't as good as her father at drying her hair and asked Hee-sung to do it instead. During the conversation, Hee-sung learned that Ji-won had gone to clean the workshop. Panic instantly filled him. Sure enough, the man had regained consciousness and was desperately struggling. Hee-sung rushed to the workshop in terror. When he arrived, Ji-won was crouched quietly near the floor. Trying to stay calm, he called out to her casually. Ji-won held up a broken cup fragment and asked if he had dropped and shattered the teacup. The cup had broken during Hee-sung's violent struggle with the prisoner. But he smoothly lied, claiming he had simply dropped it accidentally. Then he hurried Ji-won outside, suggesting they go shopping together. Thankfully, Ji-won noticed nothing suspicious. Cha Ji-won was a skilled detective. She didn't know that the man sleeping beside her every night was connected to the serial murder case the police had chased for 20 years. To appear normal, Hee-sung constantly practiced smiling naturally in front of mirrors. For more than a decade, his secret remained hidden, until his childhood friend discovered him. Unfortunately for Hee-sung, He was now a reporter. Letting him go could destroy everything. Though the reporter begged for mercy and insisted he only came to repair a necklace, Hee-sung didn't trust him. He searched through his notebook and eventually found a familiar name connected to an old case. Furious, he demanded to know why he had been investigating Nam Soon-gil. The terrified reporter finally confessed. Recently, a new murder case had occurred using the exact same method as the serial killings from 20 years ago. Because of that, he had written an article about the infamous suspect connected to the old case. 2 days earlier, someone contacted him claiming that Do Hyun-soo was trying to kill him. Soon after, a man met with the reporter and described living with Hyun-soo for several years. He painted Hyun-soo as unstable and dangerous, insisting he discovered Hyun-soo was a fugitive before suddenly disappearing. But the truth was different. In the past, while Hyun-soo searched for a lost wallet, that very man had become greedy and attempted to kill him for money. Now the man insisted Hyun-soo was trying to silence him forever. Hee-sung, secretly watching from afar, wanted no trouble and even implied that Hyun-soo was probably already dead. The man cruelly replied that someone like that deserved to die anyway. Later that night, the restaurant owner grew increasingly uneasy and tried calling the reporter. If Hyun-soo was truly dead, then who had been threatening him over the phone all this time? But the reporter never answered. As he prepared to leave a voicemail, someone wearing a raincoat suddenly entered the restaurant. Terrified, he shouted into the phone that Hyun-soo had come to kill him. The mysterious figure charged toward him at terrifying speed. The next morning, the restaurant owner was found dead. Detective Cha Ji-won immediately arrived at the crime scene. The murder method perfectly matched the serial killings from 20 years earlier. Fortunately, the restaurant's CCTV had captured footage of the killer wearing a raincoat. Ji-won remembered that her husband had also returned home late the previous night wearing a raincoat. But she quickly dismissed the thought. The investigation soon led them to the victim's final phone call, the missing reporter. That night before bed, Ji-won playfully made Hee-sung wear the raincoat again. He froze nervously as she zipped him up and adjusted the hood over his head. Then she stared thoughtfully for a moment. When she mentioned the murder victim from earlier that day, Hee-sung remained unusually calm and casually asked if she suspected him of killing someone. Ji-won burst into laughter. She explained that when he came home wearing the raincoat the previous night, even she could barely recognize him. Which made her wonder. How had the victim immediately recognized the killer as the fugitive serial murderer everyone had been searching for over the past 20 years? The victim had identified the killer as Do Hyun-soo immediately, yet the murderer had been wearing a mask and a raincoat. Baek Hee-sung calmly suggested that maybe the killer wasn't Hyun-soo at all. But Ji-won firmly insisted it had to be him. What she didn't realize was that the man sitting right in front of her was the real Do Hyun-soo. She also had no idea that earlier that very day, her husband had nearly been caught by her. Hyun-soo had gone to the reporter's apartment to erase evidence, but moments after entering he heard knocking outside the door. Looking through the peephole, he froze in shock. It was Cha Ji-won. Knowing his detective wife would definitely enter the apartment, Ji-won noticed the untouched food delivery outside the door had already gone bad. She searched the apartment carefully but found no sign of the reporter herself. The woman's phone had been switched off the entire time. Then Ji-won noticed a brand new piece of clothing crumpled awkwardly beneath a chair. It immediately struck her as suspicious. When she touched the computer keyboard, it was still warm. Someone had only just left the apartment. Ji-won and the officers began searching every corner of the home, unaware that Hyun-soo was hanging dangerously from the outside balcony. Ji-won even leaned out to inspect the balcony area more closely. Suddenly, Hyun-soo's foot slipped. The small noise instantly caught Ji-won's attention, and she slowly started moving toward the sound. Just as she was about to discover him, Ji-won's phone rang. Using one hand to cling desperately to the balcony, Hyun-soo held his phone with the other and pretended to casually ask whether she knew the missing reporter. He told Ji-won the woman had supposedly come to his workshop looking for her and asked if she needed to return immediately. Ji-won instructed him to send the reporter to the police station and wait there for her. But unfortunately, a young boy downstairs had spotted him hanging outside the balcony and was staring upward in confusion. Ji-won noticed the child looking upward suspiciously and started moving toward the balcony again. Panicking, Hyun-soo suddenly told her over the phone that he felt feverish. Ji-won immediately became worried about her husband. Hyun-soo quickly slipped away and rushed back to his workshop. The moment he entered, he ran straight toward the basement. What he didn't know was that the reporter had also been desperately trying to free himself. As soon as Hyun-soo entered the basement, the reporter attacked him. The two struggled violently. At that exact moment, Ji-won returned home. Just as she reached for the workshop door, it suddenly opened from inside. It was obvious the two had somehow reached an agreement. Ji-won carefully treated the wound on Hyun-soo's forehead while the reporter sat there filled with frustration. After all, he was technically the real victim. Seeing her husband injured made Ji-won furious. She handcuffed the reporter and arrested him for assaulting Baek Hee-sung. The reporter desperately turned toward Hyun-soo for help. Hyun-soo calmly defended him. He explained to Ji-won that the whole thing was just a misunderstanding and admitted he may have sounded rude earlier, causing unnecessary tension. The reporter was completely speechless. After returning home, the reporter immediately checked his hidden camera footage. Sure enough, the camera had been tampered with. That meant Hyun-soo had already taken the recording. If that footage were ever exposed, her entire life would be destroyed. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo believed he had successfully protected his secret identity once again. But unknown to him, the true mastermind behind everything had already begun moving against him. At the same time, the police investigation into the restaurant owner's murder intensified. The media reported that the killing appeared identical to the serial murders committed 20 years ago by fugitive suspect Do Hyun-soo. The reporter quietly asked Hyun-soo an important question. Why would someone pretend to be Do Hyun-soo and commit murder now? Before he could continue, Hyun-soo noticed Eun-ha nearby and quickly shoved his childhood friend outside. Soon afterward, Ji-won interviewed the dead restaurant owner's wife. She asked whether the victim had any connection to Do Hyun-soo. The widow explained that years ago, her husband and Hyun-soo had briefly worked together delivering food for a restaurant. Recently, her husband had frequently received threatening phone calls from someone claiming to be Hyun-soo. Cha Ji-won and her team visited the restaurant where Do Hyun-soo had supposedly worked years ago. Ji-won noticed something strange immediately. The signature side dishes served there looked exactly like the ones Baek Hee-sung often made at home. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo dragged the reporter outside and demanded to know what he really wanted from him. The reporter calmly explained that he knew he wasn't the restaurant owner's killer. The estimated time of death was around 3 in the morning, and at that exact time, Hyun-soo had been in the basement with him. So why was the police convinced Hyun-soo was the murderer? Why did even the dead man seem to believe Hyun-soo had come to kill him? The reporter concluded that someone was deliberately trying to expose Do Hyun-soo and drag him back into the public eye. But his name was already becoming the center of attention online. Hyun-soo asked why he was suddenly so invested in helping him. Finally dropping the act, the reporter admitted he wanted to work with him. He would help clear his name, and in return he would give him an exclusive story. But Hyun-soo himself still couldn't understand one thing. Who exactly was framing him? At the same time, Ji-won continued questioning the restaurant owner. The owner confirmed that Hyun-soo had indeed worked there years ago. According to him, Hyun-soo got along reasonably well with the victim. However, Hyun-soo never had identification papers, so the owner had paid him in cash. The owner bitterly complained that Hyun-soo eventually disappeared without even saying goodbye. What nobody there knew was the truth behind Hyun-soo's disappearance. Years earlier, during a rainy night delivery, one of his co-workers learned Hyun-soo had no real identity and secretly planned to attack him in the woods. Hyun-soo tried to escape. A speeding car suddenly crashed into him. That accident completely changed his life. It was the moment he took on the identity of Baek Hee-sung. The real Baek Hee-sung, however, had secretly been hidden away inside his own home for 20 years by his powerful father. Elsewhere, the real Baek Hee-sung preparing himself for violence. He smashed a wall clock and searched desperately for something he could use as a weapon. He waited nervously for someone to appear. Then his phone suddenly rang. On the screen was little Eun-ha crying as she searched for her parents. Gently, he comforted her and promised Daddy was busy outside but would come home soon. He told her to listen carefully to Grandma in the meantime. Unha had no idea that moments earlier, her father had nearly been exposed by her detective mother. Everything began when an elderly woman contacted the police. 5 years earlier, she had accidentally taken a photo of a man she believed was the fugitive Do Hyun-soo. She insisted she could never mistake him. The police immediately rushed to retrieve the photograph. At the same time, the reporter warned Hyun-soo that detectives were already heading to the old woman's house. If the photo became public, his entire life as Baek Hee-sung would collapse instantly. To destroy the evidence, Hyun-soo and the reporter had to reach the house before the police did. But the moment the reporter entered the house, everything went wrong. He discovered the old woman tied up inside. Someone struck him violently from behind. Outside, Hyun-soo suddenly noticed a dark figure moving through the shadows nearby. Hyun-soo and the reporter agreed to meet later at a motel nearby. At the same time, the police finally arrived at the old woman's house. The moment Hyun-soo heard the approaching officers, he prepared to escape. As he climbed over the wall, Ji-won's voice suddenly stopped him for a brief second. He absolutely could not let his wife catch him there. So he ran. As a veteran detective, Ji-won immediately chased after the fleeing figure. Eventually, he lured her into an abandoned warehouse. Using her flashlight, Ji-won searched for the power switch in the darkness. Suddenly, the overhead lights exploded. In the chaos, Hyun-soo quickly struck her head lightly with a wooden plank, hoping to escape without revealing himself. But just as he turned to flee, he noticed heavy tools falling from above toward Ji-won. Instinctively, he rushed forward to shield her. Afterward, he quickly handcuffed Ji-won to a pipe so he could escape. Then he headed toward the motel where he planned to meet the reporter. Officers arrived and freed Ji-won from the warehouse. Unfortunately, the old woman's photograph had already been stolen. At first, everyone assumed Hyun-soo had gotten there first. But Ji-won immediately realized something didn't feel right. When she reported that someone had beaten them to the evidence, another detective suddenly remembered a suspicious cup from earlier. After examining it, they discovered a hidden listening device inside. That meant someone inside the investigation had been leaking information. Then the police found something else inside the warehouse. A wristwatch. The moment Ji-won saw it, she froze. With trembling hands, she turned the watch over and checked the engraving on the back. It belonged to her husband. Elsewhere, Hyun-soo regained consciousness and realized he was trapped inside an empty drain swimming pool. Standing above him was the taxi driver. Earlier, Hyun-soo thought he could protect himself using a small hidden glass shard. But when he met the driver, the man casually pretended to eat sunflower seeds before suddenly drugging him. Even though Hyun-soo stabbed him with the hidden glass piece during the struggle, he was ultimately overpowered. The taxi driver had waited 20 years for this moment. He activated the swimming pool system, slowly flooding the pool with water while leaving Hyun-soo trapped inside. Hyun-soo still didn't understand why this man hated him so much. Then the driver pointed toward a photograph hanging nearby and demanded to know where his missing wife, Mi-suk, was. 20 years earlier, she had entered Hyun-soo's father's car and was never seen again. The driver accused Hyun-soo of helping his father create a false alibi back then, allowing him to escape suspicion. But Hyun-soo insisted he knew nothing about the woman's disappearance. Then the driver pulled out a necklace pendant. Hyun-soo instantly recognized it. Years ago, his older sister had given him that exact pendant at their father's funeral, telling him it would protect him and that he should never take it off. But according to the driver, the necklace was actually a custom-made couple pendant. He and his wife each owned one. The driver bitterly explained that after the restaurant owner stole Hyun-soo's belongings, he realized Hyun-soo was still alive. That discovery inspired him to imitate the old serial murders and kill the restaurant owner, knowing the police would immediately begin hunting Hyun-soo again. At that moment, Hyun-soo finally realized his sister might have hidden terrible secrets from him all these years. Meanwhile, the motel owner had witnessed the taxi driver dragging Hyun-soo away. Once Ji-won confirmed the kidnapped man was truly her husband, she completely lost composure. By then, the police had already identified the taxi driver as the real killer behind the recent murders. But the driver cared about only one thing. Where was his wife? Meanwhile, Hyun-soo was slowly drowning. Using the taxi's GPS tracker, the police finally located the swimming pool facility. Ji-won rushed inside. The moment she opened the door, the driver attacked her. Thankfully, Ji-won defended herself skillfully while another detective engaged the driver in a violent fight. Ji-won immediately ran to save Hyun-soo. But by then, he had already disappeared beneath the water. Ji-won jumped into the flooded pool herself. Nearby, the older detective was stabbed during the struggle. However, the taxi driver was accidentally knocked backward, smashing the back of his head against a machine. When Ji-won finally pulled Hyun-soo from the water, he wasn't moving. Hyun-soo was rushed to the hospital. He suddenly woke up. Terrified that his real identity might already be exposed, his first instinct was to flee the hospital immediately. He even ran barefoot through the hallway. Then he suddenly bumped into Ji-won. But instead of arresting him, Ji-won ran straight into his arms and hugged him tightly. Soon afterward, Hyun-soo's mother stormed into the hospital room screaming angrily. Yet strangely, she quickly ordered Ji-won's family to leave because their family needed to talk privately. Ji-won's mother became furious at being treated like an outsider. More and more, she felt her husband's family was hiding something enormous from her. At the same time, the taxi driver survived his injuries. Oddly, however, he suddenly behaved like someone with severe memory loss. But the truth was much darker. He was only pretending. Because elsewhere, Hyun-soo's father and the real Baek Hee-sung were secretly discussing how to silence him forever. If the driver exposed Hyun-soo's real identity, every one of them would be destroyed. In other words, they were considering murder. What they didn't know was that Ji-won had also started becoming suspicious of her husband. Late one night, carrying tools in secret, she quietly entered Hee-sung's workshop and stared toward the basement door. At the same time, Hyun-soo's mother was cleaning her son's room when she noticed something hidden beneath the bed. At first, she assumed it was money or harmless junk. Instead, she discovered stacks of disturbing photographs and a blood-stained knife. But what truly shattered her were the bloody fingernails hidden among the photos. In that moment, she finally realized something terrifying. In despair, she picked up the knife and almost ended her own life. But then she suddenly noticed her son outside in the yard, digging a hole in the rain. Not far away, a motionless person was lying on the ground. An hour earlier, the real Baek Hee-sung had been driving normally when he answered a phone call and accidentally hit someone with his car. Panicking, he secretly brought the injured person back home. His mother rushed outside and demanded to know what he was doing. His horrified mother asked if he planned to bury the victim alive. Then she realized the injured man was still breathing. But Hee-sung acted as though he didn't even notice. Calmly, he told his mother to go back inside before she got soaked by the rain. At that moment, she realized she had raised a devil. She had to stop him. Then, while Hee-sung wasn't paying attention, she stabbed him. But she never expected her husband to save their son's life. Although the real Baek Hee-sung fell into a coma and became bedridden, his parents refused to give up on him. Meanwhile, Do Hyun-soo also regained consciousness about a month later under the director's care. Hyun-soo remembered that his co-worker had tried to kill him for money after discovering he had no legal identity. After escaping despite being stabbed, Hyun-soo was suddenly struck by a passing car. Although he had no idea where he was now, he understood one thing clearly. His identity could never be exposed. The hospital director walked into the room. Hyun-soo instinctively dropped everything and tried to leave, but his weakened body made escape impossible. So instead, they sat down and negotiated. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. And just like that, Do Hyun-soo gained a new identity. Baek Hee-sung. What Hyun-soo never expected was that this new life would completely change his fate. There was one girl in particular, Cha Ji-won, who constantly stayed by his side. At first, he tried avoiding her because he was still technically a wanted fugitive. But as the years passed, their feelings slowly grew stronger. Hyun-soo not only fully embraced the identity of Baek Hee-sung, but he also married Ji-won and built a family with her. When Ji-won decided she wanted to become a detective, he supported her completely without objection. But one day, everything nearly collapsed. While drifting in and out of consciousness during an illness, Hyun-soo mistakenly saw Ji-won as his older sister. He begged her to live happily and never come searching for him again because he was no longer Do Hyun-soo. As a detective, she immediately understood the meaning behind them. The husband was the fugitive suspect the police had hunted for 20 years. After Eun-ha was born, Ji-won tested him carefully by telling him they had a healthy baby. Instead of happiness, Hyun-soo looked terrified. Ji-won had been crying out of happiness. But Hyun-soo was genuinely afraid. He feared that one day his daughter would hate him after learning who he really was. Ji-won, however, remained completely unaware until the day he accidentally revealed the truth while unconscious. Looking back, she realized how much she had ignored. This time, she had no choice but to uncover the truth herself. After all, Do Hyun-soo's father had once been the infamous serial killer who shocked the entire country. Not long after his father's death, Hyun-soo himself supposedly murdered the village foreman and vanished. Now Ji-won smashed open the basement lock with a hammer. Then she sprayed luminol across the floor. To her horror, massive glowing stains appeared everywhere. Ji-won's mind went blank. Then she noticed an old baby walker tucked away in the corner. Memories flooded back of how lovingly Hyun-soo had cared for Eun-ha when she was little. So instead of confronting him immediately, she decided to observe him secretly. Pretending it was simply a congratulatory gift after his hospital discharge, Ji-won gave Hyun-soo a wristwatch. On the surface it looked ordinary. But hidden inside was a tracking device. That same night, he quietly slipped out of the house alone. But unlike before, Ji-won was now watching him carefully. Hyun-soo hurried to meet the reporter because something still bothered him deeply. Why had the taxi driver repeatedly insisted that his wife disappeared after getting into Hyun-soo's father's car 20 years ago? Do Hyun-soo couldn't stop thinking about the taxi driver's words. The driver claimed his wife disappeared after getting into Hyun-soo's father's car 20 years ago. But Hyun-soo clearly remembered that on that particular day, his father had been with him the entire time. That meant only one thing was possible. His father must have had an accomplice. And Hyun-soo believed his older sister probably knew who that accomplice was. Now Hyun-soo desperately needed answers, so he asked the reporter to help him find his sister. When she discovered that her husband secretly met the reporter late at night, her suspicions only deepened. But when Hyun-soo returned home, Ji-won didn't confront him directly. Rather than exposing her suspicions, she decided to continue watching him carefully to learn the truth. Then one day, the reporter finally called him with important news. She had found his sister. The meeting place was deep in the countryside. Ji-won received a phone call from Hyun-soo saying he needed to meet a client and wouldn't be home for dinner. The moment he hung up, Ji-won became suspicious again. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo finally arrived at the agreed location. His older sister had already been waiting there for a long time. It had been 20 years since they last saw each other. At the time, he was only 14 years old when he discovered that his sister had killed the village foreman. To protect his sister, Hyun-soo intentionally took the blame onto himself and disappeared, hoping she could live peacefully, but now he needed her help. The siblings talked late into the night, unaware that someone stood outside secretly listening to every word. Cha Ji-won heard everything. And with every sentence, her entire world collapsed. Little Eun-ha had been left at her grandmother's house. But when her grandmother noticed she was solving advanced third-grade math problems despite being so young, her expression suddenly changed completely. In a fit of panic, the old woman ripped the notebook apart while muttering that smart children only grow up to become monsters. Terrified, Eun-ha burst into tears. But her grandmother insisted she was only trying to protect her. The truth was, Eun-ha wasn't actually her biological granddaughter. Her real son, the original Baek Hee-sung, was still alive in a vegetative state. As a child, the real Hee-sung had been exceptionally intelligent. Now, whenever she looked at bright and intelligent Eun-ha, she became terrified that the girl might someday follow the same path as her son. The moment she saw Eun-ha crying in fear, however, the old woman immediately panicked and didn't know what to do. Trying desperately to comfort her, she asked Eun-ha what she wanted. Afterward, she brought the little girl home, cooked special food for her, and even fed her gently herself. Deep down, she only wanted to calm Eun-ha before sending her away again. Just then, Eunha's grandfather returned home. Baek Man-woo looked at his wife, Gong Mi-ja. He asked how she could be so careless when he had already walked into the house without her noticing. Mi-ja did not know how to answer, so she quickly asked the little girl to greet her grandfather. Man-woo pretended nothing was wrong in front of the child. He dragged Mi-ja into another room and questioned whether she felt any guilt at all. Yet she was laughing happily with a stranger's child in their house. While the couple argued inside, seeing the housekeeper walk by, the child politely asked where the bathroom was, but the maid gave no response. She only smiled strangely before walking away. The girl did not know that the maid was deaf. Curious, she tried to follow her, unaware that the maid was secretly tending to the comatose Hee-sung in the hidden room. Just then, Do Hyun-soo, living under the identity of Baek Hee-sung, spotted the little girl standing motionless outside the secret room. Furious, he lashed out at Mi-ja, saying that even a 6-year-old child could wander around freely. One day, while Hyun-soo was away, Mi-ja stood beside her unconscious son and seemed to make a terrifying decision. Slowly, she reached toward the oxygen tube, believing that a monster like him had no reason to continue living. The moment she disconnected it, the monitor began to fail, and Hee-sung gasped desperately for air. After receiving a message from the maid, Hyun-soo rushed home immediately, but this time Mi-ja stopped him. Baek Man-woo hurried forward as well, only to freeze when he heard the barely conscious Hee-sung whisper weakly that his mother should not blame herself. Even after waking up, Hee-sung's sharp mind remained intact. His first question was about the man he had hit with his car years ago. The couple's hearts sank instantly because that man had stolen Hee-sung's identity and was now living as him with a wife and daughter. At the same time, Hyun-soo was suffering silently. He had married Cha Ji-won, a homicide detective who spent every day trying to capture Do Hyun-soo, never realizing that the man she loved was the very fugitive she had been chasing. Determined to ease her burden and prove his innocence, Hyun-soo took off his wedding ring and prepared to risk everything. What he did not know was that Ji-won had already begun suspecting his true identity. Soon after, the body of a 50-year-old woman was discovered. The victim turned out to be the Baek family's housekeeper, but the killer's fingerprints did not exist in any police database. The moment Ji-won heard this, her instincts pointed toward her husband. She secretly collected fingerprints from his personal belongings and compared them to the evidence from the crime scene. To her horror, they matched perfectly. Meanwhile, the real Baek Hee-sung had always suspected the maid was hiding something. He worried that she might know too much about the family's secrets. Gong Mi-ja reassured him that the maid had signed confidentiality papers and knew nothing important. Still, Hee-sung remained cautious. Pretending to test her, he suddenly grabbed her and asked if she truly could not read lips. Terrified, the maid quickly wrote on paper that she really could not understand lip movements. But Hee-sung noticed something suspicious in her response and became convinced she was lying. Not long after, the maid submitted her resignation. Mi-ja was stunned when the woman boldly demanded not only retirement compensation but also additional silence money. The maid warned that she knew every dark secret hidden inside the Baek household, and each one could destroy them. Desperate, Mi-ja tried to persuade her to stay and even offered to double her salary, but the maid refused. As the maid attempted to leave, she accidentally shoved Mi-ja, causing her to fall and injure her forehead. Hearing the noise, Hee-sung rolled into the room in his wheelchair and angrily demanded to know what the maid had done to his mother. The maid, now fearless, threatened to expose the family. Suddenly, to everyone's shock, Hee-sung slowly rose from the wheelchair and approached her. Baek Man-woo originally intended to help his son dispose of the body afterward. Hyun-soo unexpectedly arrived. Fortunately, the family had already prepared a careful plan. The house suddenly lost power. Mi-ja asked Hyun-soo to help her find candles, and during that moment they secretly managed to collect his fingerprints. Ji-won sensed something was wrong but could not explain why. Later, after comparing the fingerprints from the murder scene with her husband's, she confronted him directly and demanded that he surrender to the police. She wanted him to confess not only that he was Do Hyun-soo, but also that he had murdered the housekeeper. Hyun-soo admitted his real identity but firmly denied killing anyone. Before the police could arrive, he staged an elaborate escape using the security cameras so that Ji-won would not become implicated in the situation. He then ordered her to disable the surveillance system. Only after did he finally relax, but Ji-won was furious. She demanded to know how he could dare threaten her with a knife. Hyun-soo calmly demonstrated that the knife had no blade and could never have hurt her. He explained that his only goal was to find the true killer. If he were arrested, the police would never uncover the real culprit. As Hyun-soo prepared to leave alone, Ji-won grabbed him and handcuffed them together. But Hyun-soo outsmarted her once again, tricking her into following him to a motel before chaining her to a table leg and escaping on his own. Hyun-soo's goal was to make the police believe that his wife, Cha Ji-won, was being held hostage. However, when Ji-won returned home, she noticed someone suspicious lurking near her house. As she tried to confront the intruder, a struggle broke out, during which her clothing was torn. Fortunately, Ji-won was rescued by hotel staff and taken to safety. Despite the danger she had just escaped, she reported everything honestly to her superiors, revealing that her husband was actually Hyun-soo, the very man the police had been searching for. Her superiors did not blame her, understanding she was also a victim in the situation. She was shocked to see Hyun-soo's torn clothing appearing at the police station, still torn between duty and emotion. Meanwhile, the situation outside continued to spiral. Police officers managed to catch the person they believed was Hyun-soo, but it turned out to be a paparazzi chasing an exclusive story. Amid the chaos, Ji-won's mother fell ill and was hospitalized, forcing their daughter to be temporarily taken into police care for safety. At the same time, another part of the story unfolded around Baek Hee-sung's family. When they returned home, they found the house completely ransacked. His sister felt an immediate sense of danger. Suddenly, strange noises came from outside. When she stepped out of her room, she noticed the living room lights had been turned off, and a shadow was sitting on the sofa. Quickly, she locked the door and told the child inside not to open it for anyone except the mother. To avoid being recognized, she wore a badge from her pocket, knowing the intruder might mistake her for someone else. When the attacker finally removed their mask, they were the same person who had given her a pendant at their father's funeral, someone linked to the long-hidden conspiracy the police had been investigating. The attacker confirmed her identity and immediately drew a knife. Elsewhere, Hyun-soo managed to track down young Mi-suk, the only surviving witness to the case. However, when she saw him, she reacted in fear as if she had seen a ghost. Hyun-soo attempted a quick attack, but he reacted faster than expected. Still, he was no match for him physically. During the confrontation, Mi-suk tried to prove her credibility by showing him a forged work certificate allegedly issued by Ji-won. He called Ji-won, but her phone was switched off. He then contacted the police, only to receive confirmation that the document was indeed authentic. At that moment, Hyun-soo's world collapsed emotionally. Unbeknownst to him, the police had staged part of the information to manipulate the situation and expose the real truth behind the case. However, the strategy nearly led Hyun-soo to believe that he himself had become a murderer. Overwhelmed by rage and confusion, he considered killing Mi-suk to protect Ji-won and clear his name. But just as he was about to strike, he hesitated. In the end, Hyun-soo regained control of himself. The confrontation concluded not in violence, but in an emotional embrace between him and Ji-won, marking a fragile moment of resolution in their chaotic and tragic journey. And with that, the story comes to an end. Follow and subscribe for more.